March 17, 1943, 0247 hours. North Atlantic, Captain Lieutenant Werner Hartenstein stood on the conning tower of U-156, scanning the black horizon through Zeiss binoculars. There was no moon. Cloud cover blocked the stars. The darkness was absolute, the kind of darkness that made surface attacks possible. For 2 years, German U-boats had owned the night. Surface at night, use darkness as camouflage, attack convoys silhouetted against the lighter sky, dive before dawn. The British and Americans had no way to detect a submarine on the surface in total darkness. Visual lookouts were useless. Their primitive radar couldn't distinguish a submarine's low profile from wave returns. Tonight, Hartenstein had spotted convoy HX-229, 63 merchant ships heading from New York to Britain. His wolf pack of 8 U-boats was positioning for attack. Standard procedure: surface, approach on diesel engines, fire torpedoes from 800 meters, dive if escorts react. Range to convoy? Hartenstein asked his watch officer. 12 kilometers, Herr Kalu. Speed 8 knots. We'll be in attack position in 40 minutes. Perfect. They'd attack just before dawn, in maximum darkness, when lookouts were most fatigued and least alert. The convoy escorts, destroyers, and corvettes would be blind. By the time they realized they were under attack, U-156 would have sunk 3 ships and submerged. All ahead full. Prepare torpedo tubes 1 through 4. U-156 increased speed to 16 knots, diesel engines roaring, throwing up white bow waves. On the surface, U-boats were fast, faster than most merchant ships, nearly as fast as escorts. Speed was safety in darkness. At 9 kilometers from the convoy, Hartenstein noticed something odd. One of the escort destroyers had turned toward him. Just turned. No signal, no flares, just a course change pointing directly at U-156's position. Coincidence? Had to be. There was no way the destroyer could see them in this darkness. At 7 kilometers, the destroyer increased speed, still heading directly toward U-156. Hartenstein felt ice in his stomach. Watch officer, confirm destroyer bearing. Bearing constant, Herr Kalu. Range closing. He's heading straight for us. Impossible. He can't see us. Bearing still constant. Range 6 kilometers. He's definitely tracking us. Hartenstein made his decision. Crash dive! All ahead flank. Take us down. The diving alarm shrieked. Men scrambled below. Ballast tanks flooded. U-156's bow dipped beneath the waves, but they were too late. The destroyer, USS Bori, had detected U-156 on radar at 14 kilometers, 8 nautical miles. The new centimetric radar could see a submarine's conning tower at ranges that should have been impossible. Commander Charles Hutchins had watched the radar contact approach for 6 minutes before turning to intercept. As U-156 crash-dived, Bori's sonar operators acquired the submarine at 1,200 yards. Depth charges were already set. 6 charges rolled off the stern, set for 150 feet. The underwater explosions lifted U-156's stern, buckling hull plates. Seawater flooded the engine room through cracked seals. The submarine's dive became uncontrolled, plunging past test depth. At 280 meters, the pressure hull ruptured. Werner Hartenstein and 51 crew members died instantly as the Atlantic crushed U-156 like a tin can. On Bori's bridge, Commander Hutchins watched the sonar contact disappear. The entire engagement, from radar detection to kill, had taken 11 minutes. The submarine never saw them coming, never knew what detected them, never had a chance to fight or flee effectively. Hutchins picked up the radio. Convoy escort Bori, submarine contact destroyed, resuming patrol station. Another routine kill. The U-boat's reign of terror was ending, one radar contact at a time. The Germans still thought darkness protected them. They had no idea the Americans could see in the dark. Admiral Karl Dönitz, commanding the U-boat fleet from headquarters in Lorient, France, was watching his carefully planned Atlantic campaign collapse. March 1943 should have been the decisive month. He had 240 operational U-boats, more than ever before. His Wolfpack tactics had sunk 627,000 tons of Allied shipping in November 1942 alone. The British were losing ships faster than they could build replacements. Then, suddenly, in March 1943, everything changed. U-boats that surfaced at night were being detected and destroyed before they could attack. Submarines operating in total darkness, invisible to the naked eye, were being hunted down with impossible precision. Between March 1st and March 20th, 1943, Dönitz lost 15 U-boats. Not to aircraft with searchlights, not to convoy escorts that got lucky. To systematic, precise interceptions in pitch darkness by destroyers that somehow knew exactly where the submarines were. On March 23rd, Dönitz received a report from U-662, one of the few boats to survive an encounter. Kapitänleutnant Müller reported, surfaced at 0300 hours in total darkness to charge batteries. No moon, heavy clouds, visibility less than 100 meters. At 0323, destroyer appeared from darkness at high speed, heading directly for our position. No flares fired, no searchlights, yet escort altered course precisely to intercept. Crash dived at 0324. Destroyer dropped depth charge pattern beginning 0326. 23 charges, accurately placed. Sustained damage to rudder and pressure hull, forced to abort patrol. Müller's report continued. Destroyer could not have detected us visually. Sea state and darkness made visual detection impossible beyond 200 meters. Destroyer was tracking us from at least 4 kilometers based on time from course change to weapons release. Suspected new detection method, request intelligence assessment. Dönitz read similar reports from 6 other boats. All described the same pattern. Surface in darkness, escort vessel turns toward them from impossible distance, accurate interception, depth charge attack before submarine can submerge and evade. German naval intelligence had been warning about radar since 1940. The British had radar, crude systems that could detect ships at close range. But early Allied radar couldn't detect submarines reliably. The wavelength was too long. Returns from wave surfaces overwhelmed returns from a submarine's low profile. U-boat captains had learned to ignore radar warnings. Something had changed. The Allies had developed new radar that could see submarines in total darkness at ranges exceeding 10 kilometers. The British called it Type 271 radar. It operated at 10 centimeters wavelength instead of the older 1.5 meter wavelength. The shorter wavelength provided dramatically improved resolution. The rotating antenna was mounted in a distinctive cheese radome that could see surface contacts with precision impossible for earlier systems. Development began in 1940 at the Telecommunications Research Establishment. The key breakthrough was the cavity magnetron, a device that generated high-power microwave radiation at centimetric wavelengths. British physicists John Randall and Harry Boot invented it in February 1940. By 1941, production magnetrons were being installed in radar sets. The Americans received cavity magnetron technology through the Teasard mission in September 1940, when British scientists shared their most secret military technology in exchange for American industrial capacity. Within 18 months, American factories were producing thousands of centimetric radar sets monthly. Type 271 radar could detect a submarine's conning tower at 5,000 yards, over 2 nautical miles, in perfect darkness. The submarine appeared on the radar screen as a clear blip, distinct from wave clutter. Escort commanders could track submarines from the moment they surfaced, vectoring destroyers to intercept before the submarine detected any threat. The installation rate was devastating for Germany. By March 1943, 70% of Allied escort vessels carried centimetric radar. Every convoy had multiple radar-equipped escorts. U-boats surfacing anywhere near a convoy were detected within minutes. The tactical implications were catastrophic. U-boat doctrine depended on surface attacks at night. Submerged attacks were difficult. Slow underwater speed, limited battery endurance, poor visibility through periscopes. Surface attacks were fast, flexible, and safe because darkness hid the submarine. Centimetric radar eliminated that safety. Now, surfacing at night meant immediate detection. U-boats lost their primary tactical advantage. April 1943 became Black May for the U-boat fleet. 43 boats lost in 1 month. Dönitz withdrew from the North Atlantic temporarily on May 24, 1943, admitting defeat. His official order stated, "The situation in the North Atlantic now forces a temporary withdrawal from convoy operations. Enemy location devices have made our tactics too costly. We have lost this battle." Lieutenant Peter Gretton commanded Escort Group B-7, protecting convoy ONS-5 in late April and early May 1943. His flagship, HMS Duncan, carried Type 271 radar. The convoy's escort included 7 destroyers and corvettes, 6 equipped with centimetric radar. On the night of May 4th to 5th, 30 U-boats attacked ONS-5 in coordinated wolf-pack assault. It should have been a massacre. 30 submarines against 42 merchant ships protected by 7 escorts. Instead, the U-boats were slaughtered. Gretton's radar-equipped escorts detected surfaced U-boats at ranges up to 6 miles. Every time a submarine surfaced to attack, radar picked it up immediately. Escorts vectored to intercept, forcing submarines to dive before reaching firing positions. When submarines tried to surface in different locations, radar found them again. Over 36 hours of battle, the U-boats sank 13 merchant ships, a 30% loss rate that would normally be considered a German victory. But the escorts sank 6 U-boats and damaged 9 more so severely they had to abort patrol. A 50% casualty rate for the attacking force, unsustainable losses. Gretton's after-action report stated, Type 271 radar provided continuous tracking of all surface submarines within 10-mile radius. U-boats attempting night surface attacks were detected and engaged before reaching firing positions. Enemy doctrine appears predicated on undetected surface approach. Radar eliminates this capability entirely. Recommend continuing current tactics. Enemy has no effective counter to centimetric radar. The Type 271 specifications: frequency 3000 MHz, wavelength 10 centimeters, power output 25 kilowatts peak, pulse repetition frequency 500 Hz, antenna rotation 20 revolutions per minute, range against submarine conning tower 5,000 yards, range against large ship 25,000 yards, bearing accuracy 2 degrees, range accuracy 25 yards. Compared to earlier Type 286 radar, frequency 214 MHz, wavelength 1.4 meters, power output 70 kilowatts peak, range against submarine conning tower 1,000 yards in ideal conditions, usually 0 in rough seas, bearing accuracy 10 degrees, range accuracy 100 yards. The resolution improvement was revolutionary. Type 286 couldn't reliably distinguish a submarine from wave clutter. Type 271 showed submarines clearly separated from sea returns. Operators could track multiple contacts simultaneously, providing tactical picture impossible with earlier technology. American production of centimetric radar exceeded British production by mid-1943. Western Electric, RCA, and General Electric manufactured radar sets at combined rate of 2,000 units monthly by late 1943. Every escort vessel, every patrol aircraft, every capital ship received radar. The scale of deployment overwhelmed any possible German countermeasure. German U-boats carried METOX radar detectors from August 1942 onward. METOX detected emissions from British 1.5-meter radar, giving U-boats warning they were being tracked. Captains would dive before escorts closed to attack range. METOX was useless against centimetric radar. The detector couldn't receive 10-centimeter wavelengths. U-boats had no warning they were being tracked until depth charges exploded around them. By September 1943, German intelligence understood they faced centimetric radar. Captured equipment from downed aircraft and boarding parties on damaged escorts provided examples. German engineers analyzed the cavity magnetrons and realized they couldn't duplicate the technology quickly. Germany attempted development of centimetric radar from 1943 onward. The Telefunken company produced experimental sets but never achieved mass production. German cavity magnetrons were unreliable, low power, and difficult to manufacture. By war's end, fewer than 200 German centimetric radar sets existed, none deployed on operational vessels. The technology gap reflected deeper industrial and scientific differences. Centimetric radar required precision manufacturing of microwave components, extensive testing facilities, and integration of radar sets into shipboard systems. Britain and America had industrial capacity for all three simultaneously. Germany was fighting a multi-front war with strategic bombing destroying factories. Every resource devoted to radar development was resources not building U-boats, aircraft, or tanks. Dönitz received multiple proposals for countering Allied radar. Some suggested coating submarines with radar-absorbent material, impractical with available materials and submarine operating conditions. Others proposed deploying radar decoys, balloon-suspended corner reflectors creating false radar contacts. Tried operationally, proved ineffective. Escorts quickly learned to distinguish decoys from real submarines. The most desperate proposal: abandon night surface operations entirely, operate submerged continuously. This eliminated radar detection, but reduced U-boat effectiveness by 70%. Submerged speed was 7 knots maximum for limited duration before battery exhaustion. Surface speed was 17 knots indefinitely on diesel power. Submerged U-boats couldn't position ahead of convoys, couldn't chase targets, couldn't escape pursuing escorts. The snorkel device, allowing submarines to run diesel engines while submerged at periscope depth, was deployed from early 1944. This helped but didn't solve the fundamental problem. Snorkeling reduced speed to 6 knots maximum and left a visible wake easily detected by aircraft. Snorkeling U-boats were still being detected and sunk, just differently. The statistical story is brutal. In 1942, before widespread centimetric radar deployment, U-boats sank 1,160 Allied ships, totaling 6.25 million tons. U-boat losses: 85 boats. Exchange ratio: 13.6 ships sunk per U-boat lost. In 1943, after centimetric radar deployment, U-boats sank 463 ships, totaling 2.58 million tons. U-boat losses: 244 boats. Exchange ratio: 1.9 ships sunk per U-boat lost. In 1944 to 1945, U-boats sank 172 ships, totaling 0.85 million tons. U-boat losses: 452 boats. Exchange ratio: 0.38 ships sunk per U-boat lost. The trend is unmistakable. As radar deployment increased, U-boat effectiveness collapsed and losses skyrocketed. By 1945, U-boats were being sunk faster than they could sink merchant ships. The campaign was mathematically doomed. Individual U-boat career lengths tell the same story. U-boats commissioned in 1941 averaged 8.5 combat patrols before loss. U-boats commissioned in 1943 averaged 2.1 combat patrols. U-boats commissioned in 1945 averaged 0.4 combat patrols. Many were sunk on their first patrol. Some never completed even one patrol. Crew survival rates dropped catastrophically. Of 40,000 men who served in U-boats during the war, 28,000 died, a 70% fatality rate, the highest of any military service in World War II for any nation. Most died after 1943, when centimetric radar made U-boat operations suicidal. Kapitänleutnant Erich Topp, one of Germany's most successful U-boat commanders with 34 ships sunk, described the change in his post-war memoir. Before radar, we were hunters. After radar, we were hunted. The psychological difference was profound. Previously, surfacing at night meant safety and opportunity. After radar, surfacing meant probable death. Crews became fatalistic. They knew the odds were against survival. The spirit of the U-boat arm died before the war ended. The British Operational Research Section conducted detailed analysis of U-boat kills by weapon type and detection method. Before March 1943, visual detection 62%, radar detection 18%, sonar detection 12%, other 8%. After March 1943, visual detection 23%, radar detection 61%, sonar detection 14%, other 2%. Radar had become the primary submarine detection method. The shift happened in weeks, not months. March 1943 was the turning point. Before March, U-boats had tactical advantage. After March, escorts had overwhelming advantage. Night battles became one-sided massacres. Convoy ON-202 in October 1943. 16 U-boats attacked, 0 merchant ships sunk, 3 U-boats destroyed, 5 damaged. Convoy HX-280 in February 1944. 12 U-boats attacked, 0 merchant ships sunk, 4 U-boats destroyed. The pattern repeated across dozens of convoys. U-boats couldn't sink ships faster than they were being destroyed. American destroyer escort production combined with radar deployment created insurmountable Allied advantage. In 1943, American shipyards completed 217 destroyer escorts specifically designed for anti-submarine warfare. In 1944, they completed 184 more. Every single one carried centimetric radar. By 1944, Atlantic convoys had so many escorts that submarines couldn't approach without immediate detection. The HMS Starling, commanded by Captain Frederick Walker, became the most successful anti-submarine ship of the war, with 16 U-boat kills. Walker's tactics exploited radar ruthlessly. His ships would deliberately position upwind of suspected U-boat locations. When U-boats surfaced to charge batteries, required every 24 to 48 hours, radar detected them instantly. Starling would close at maximum speed, forcing the submarine to dive, then prosecute with sonar and depth charges. Walker described his tactics. Radar allows us to find them when they're most vulnerable, on the surface. They must surface eventually to charge batteries. We simply wait, using radar to patrol areas where U-boats must eventually surface. When radar contact appears, we attack immediately, giving them no time to dive deep. The kills come from patience and technology, not courage. 6 of Starling's 16 kills came from radar-initiated attacks in total darkness. Without radar, those U-boats would have escaped undetected. German attempts at radar jamming proved futile. The Aphrodite radar jammer, deployed from late 1943, was designed to jam British radar. It produced interference in the 1.5 meter band, but was useless against 10-centimeter radar, different frequency entirely. U-boats carrying Aphrodite thought they were protected while being tracked perfectly by centimetric radar they couldn't detect or jam. The Naxos radar detector, introduced in 1944, could detect centimetric radar emissions. But by then, Allied tactics had evolved. Escorts used radar sparingly, activating only for brief periods to check for contacts. The German detector would alert the U-boat to radar sweep, but too late. The escort already knew the submarine's position. One technological solution that worked partially, the Type 21 U-boat, introduced in 1945. This was a revolutionary submarine design with streamlined hull, massive battery capacity, and high submerged speed, 17 knots submerged versus 7 knots for earlier types. The Type 21 could outrun submerged depth charge attacks and didn't need to surface as frequently. But Type 21 came too late. Only 4 boats completed combat patrols before war's end. None sank Allied ships. The technology that might have countered radar appeared 2 years after radar had already won the battle. The decisive moment in the Battle of the Atlantic wasn't D-Day or any dramatic surface engagement. It was the quiet deployment of cavity magnetrons in escort vessels throughout 1942 to 1943. By mid-1943, the Atlantic became impassable for U-boats operating with traditional tactics. Donitz's withdrawal in May 1943 acknowledged reality. The U-boats had lost. German naval archives captured after the war revealed Donitz's growing desperation. An August 1943 memorandum stated, "Allied detection devices have rendered traditional U-boat operations impractical. Losses exceed replacement rate. Current tactics are unsustainable. No technical solution available within 12 months. continue operations to tie down Allied resources, but decisive success impossible. This was strategic defeat admitted privately. Dönitz continued operations for 2 more years, but he knew the campaign was lost. U-boats after August 1943 were sacrificial weapons tying down Allied escorts and resources, not genuine threats to shipping. The human cost was staggering. In 1944 to 1945, Germany sent young crews to sea knowing their survival odds were less than 30%. Many U-boats were crewed by teenagers with minimal training. They were sent against escorts with radar, sonar, forward-throwing weapons, and overwhelming numerical superiority. It was slaughter. U-boat veteran Herbert Werner wrote in his memoir, Iron Coffins, "We sailed knowing we probably wouldn't return. The veterans were dead. The replacements were boys. The escorts had radar and aircraft and unlimited depth charges. We had torpedoes we couldn't get close enough to fire. Every patrol was a death sentence delayed by luck." Of 863 U-boats that sailed on combat patrols during the war, 754 were lost, an 87% loss rate. Centimetric radar didn't cause all those losses, but it was the decisive factor in making U-boat operations suicidal after 1943. Modern submarine warfare still grapples with radar detection. Nuclear submarines can remain submerged indefinitely, eliminating surface detection risk. But periscopes and snorkels remain detectable by sophisticated radar. The basic principle established in 1943 remains true. Detection capability determines submarine effectiveness. When Werner Hartenstein surfaced U-156 on that March night in 1943, he believed darkness protected him. German doctrine, validated by years of successful operations, said night surface operations were safe. Visual lookouts couldn't see submarines in darkness. Early radar couldn't detect submarines reliably. All true in 1942, completely false in 1943. The technology had changed, but German doctrine hadn't adapted because they didn't know the technology had changed. U-boat headquarters received reports of impossible detections, but couldn't identify the cause quickly enough. By the time German intelligence confirmed centimetric radar existed and understood its capabilities, hundreds of U-boats had been lost. The survivors modified tactics, but modifications couldn't overcome fundamental technological inferiority. You can't hide from radar in darkness. You can't outrun destroyer with 17 knots surface speed. You can't fight escort with deck gun when they detect you at 5 miles. The Battle of the Atlantic was decided by physics and engineering, not courage. German submariners were brave, skilled, and experienced. Didn't matter. Allied escorts had cavity magnetrons generating microwave radiation at 10-centimeter wavelengths, providing detection ranges that made surface operations suicidal. Technology killed the U-boat fleet, specifically a fist-sized copper cylinder containing resonant cavities that generated high-power microwaves. The cavity magnetron, invented in a British laboratory in 1940, deployed on escort vessels by 1942 to 1943, cost Germany control of the Atlantic and ultimately contributed to losing the war. Hartenstein died never knowing what detected him. Radar return from U-156's conning tower appeared on USS Boreas display at 14 kilometers, impossible distance for visual detection in darkness, impossible for early radar, routine for Type 271. The Atlantic became a killing ground not through attrition or convoy tactics, but through electromagnetic radiation bouncing off steel conning towers. The U-boats that dominated 1940 to 1942 became hunted prey in 1943 to 1945. The hunters became the hunted when the Allies learned to see in the dark. Dönitz's U-boats never recovered from this technological defeat. Production increased, new designs emerged, tactics evolved. None of it mattered. Radar saw them. Escorts killed them. The numbers don't lie. 70% casualty rate, 754 U-boats lost, 28,000 dead. The cavity magnetron won the Battle of the Atlantic. German submariners died not knowing what killed them, believing darkness protected them while electromagnetic radiation lit them up like beacons on radar screens. By the time they understood, it was too late. The technology gap was too large, arrived too quickly, and deployed at scale impossible to counter. The U-boats lost, radar won, and the Atlantic became safe for Allied shipping, enabling D-Day, enabling European liberation, enabling victory. All because British physicists invented a better magnetron in 1940 and American factories produced thousands by 1943. Technology changes warfare. The cavity magnetron changed World War II.